We have Lukasz here. He will be doing the count A to Z of Windows privilege escalations. So I'll hand over to you. Good luck.
All right, thank you. All right, can everyone hear me fine? I can definitely hear myself fine. All right, so my talk is going through the alphabet, so hopefully you all know how that works. So we're going to go through A to Z and kind of correlate or correspond a certain type of Windows privilege escalation point through that letter. All right, so it's going to be a bit of an interactive session, so you get a little prize if you get the answer right. So it encourages you guys to kind of just yell stuff at me. Very heavily, sorry. So basically, let's give it a go now. So hands up or just yell it out. What comes after A? It's that easy, guys. All right, so let's try it out for reals. The first letter of the alphabet is A, as you know, so that will correspond to a Windows privilege vulnerability or technique. What do you think that might be? Or maybe. About. All right. About me. So. There we go. Now we're getting into the spirit. There was fruit at the door as well, if you want to throw that at me later on. So about me, I'll quickly run through it. I'm a management consultant. I work for Alcon Group, a Brisbane-based consultancy. We do everything security. So what I'm going to be talking about, as I said before, basically going through each letter of the alphabet corresponding that Windows privilege to it, and basically trying to focus really on like things just like kiosks. So it might be like your Virgin check-in terminal or something like that, or Qantas or whatever. Typically it's a Windows box behind those type of things. Lockdown environments, so it might be like a defense-style area where, you know, they want to limit the amount of data that can be exfiltrated. Zero and thin clients, so Eldar's talking about some zero clients in an hour, so stick around for that if you want to hear more about that stuff as well. Published desktops like, you know, Citrix, anything Microsoft as well. And the primary focus of this talk is to kind of go from a low privilege to a higher privilege, not high to higher, and where possible try not to kind of lateral move through the network, essentially on a kiosk box, what can I do? Right, so for real this time, what's A? Let's try again. Backwards? No, it's alright. That was a good one though. Oh, close. Auto runs. Alright, so auto runs is basically anything that starts up on boot or on log on, right? So if you are in a situation where you can control some of these services or anything like that through some techniques, there's a couple of tools there that you can use to enumerate some of those services. And this is typically, like in any kind of privilege situations, one of the first things I'll run. It really, like system terminals tools really these days don't really get picked up by AV anymore. Maybe PS exec by certain things, but things like auto runs and, you know, prop dump and stuff like that don't really. So it will almost always work. All right, B. Ooh, that's a good one. What was that one over there? Sorry. What was that? Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Oh, no, sorry. Anyone else? Nope. Binary replacement or / planting. So this is a really good, it's a really classic kind of attack, and I've used it extensively. So your typical attack, if you have physical access to anything like a kiosk, and they don't have things like full disk encryption or anything like that, what you can do is, it's got that little sticky keys thing down the bottom with that example box, and I've used that extensively. Sometimes you'll be in a situation where, you know, you use things like Conboot or Kali to kind of mount the image, and then you're trying to play around with the hashes and all this kind of stuff like that, trying to, you know, do all those things. Largely it's just easy just replace set HC with cmd.exe, and upon login push shift a few times, and then you get a little command prompt box popping up, and then you can kind of just go online, create a local user and put it in the local admins group. Other binaries that you might want to replace are things like services. So anything that has that starts up as a service, like a privileged service. It might not also be a super high privileged process that you're after. It might be something like that's part of a domain service, and so you can use that to laterally move onto another box that you might be trying to target. And also anything that's called by a privileged service. So the way that Windows works is if you have a process through integrity levels, if you call another process, and these days there's starting to get onto it, and a lot more developers are lowering the integrity levels. Typically, it will fire up with the same privilege as a calling process. All right, C. No. Any others? Sorry. Nope. Okay. All right. Does anyone want some of these? All right. Config files, configuration files. So it's a super classic one. Basically, your typical ones there are your unattends, your VNCs, VS FTPD configs. SNMP is actually a pretty good potential vector because usually they'll be sharing the same SNMP community strings across a network. So if you're able to extract one of the passwords from a config file locally, you might be able to access other devices or something like that. Maybe via rewrite a Cisco switch or something like that and pop yourself into a trunk port. Web.config, I've used it a few times. I like it. I think it's a really good vector. Because typically in web.config they have database connection strings, and in there they might have like SA or a high privileged user using a database on another box, and you can break out on that database server, compromise the underlying operating system, and then potentially use whatever credits that you found on there or whatever vectors to attack the service that you're trying to go after in the first place. But then things like Bob's auto add.ps1 type script, like sysadmins might run, where they'll have usernames and passwords in there to auto join workstations to a domain. D. Yes, well done. Nice one. Alrighty, so DLL attacks. So I won't be talking about DLL injection and redirection because that typically requires some kind of privileges. So I'll be mainly talking about DLL hijacking and some of the search path issues there. So as you can read up on the screen there, I don't know if everyone can see it. Essentially what Windows goes through a series of steps when it's looking for a DLL when it's called by a process. And first of all, it's going to look in the current directory from where the application is loaded. Then there's a good blog post on it down the bottom there as well if you want to kind of check that out in more detail. It will look in System32, which typically as a low privileged user you won't have write access to, and also look at go on a system as well, you won't have write access to that. But then Windows as well, same situation, but most likely you will have access or write access to a current working directory or potentially something in a path. And that's where there are tools out there we can use things like Process Explorer, and it will run through saying every single thing that application can call, and Propmon as well, which is another really good tool by the systems terminals team. And from there, it'll show this DLL is not found, and that might lead you down the path of, okay, do I have write access to where that DLL is being called or anything like that. So, yeah. E. Sorry? Extreme force. Yeah, you can get it like a. I should have put in that office space thing where there's motion sorry, exploits. Right, so that's oldie but a goodie. So just anything in happy is always really good to target. And anything with misconfigurations like Tomcat. I can't believe it's still around, but it was not 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or so. There was still an old Tomcat server lying around, and that was the initial foothold into the network, and then you kind of went from there. But also I've seen a bit more of Jenkins kind of floating around, which is really nice to see. They're going to take over from Tomcat. Thanks, guys. So yeah, so there's some misconfigurations / exploits available for Jenkins where you can kind of similar kind of attack to Tomcat where you can just load up some stuff and run it as a system. Right, F. Alright, there's one there. file permissions, right? So this one's a goodie. So by default with Windows, any kind of install, Windows is really starting to get good now, where program files, Windows and System32 directories are always kind of locked down, so you can't really have write access to them as a local user unless someone really messed something up. And generally, most applications these days will install themselves into those directories. So having write access to those directories is typically not going to happen. But where it kind of comes into it, comes into its own is when you have like D drive or E drive and applications stored in different directories. So anything outside the default installation is going to be is potentially going to have write access to that same directory and overwrite access as well. So you can overwrite files if they're not in use. So this is good. So check file permissions for files and folders. There's a really good tool by system kernels called access check, and there's a few switches you can control to say only look for files or only look directories with this kind of permission. Specify the user, which is typically yourself. You don't care where admin can write to, and that have a look at things like configuration files. So inside those config files, they might be calling other binaries as well, which you might have write access to. So you might be able to overwrite a privileged process that's been spawned, trying to spawn another privileged process there. Can you replace the binary? A good attack doesn't really work too much anymore on like Windows 10, Windows 2016, is the startup folders for all users. So in the older operating systems, which are still around, what you can do is you plant a binary inside all users startup folder, like Windows startup all users kind of thing. And then you give admin a call saying, hey, my login's not working, you check the computer, and they log in and the binary call is called. Right, yeah. G. Yes, oh geez, I don't have enough. Alright, so put your hand up. Oh, good luck. No, he'll come down, and someone over here will run. Whoops, sorry. Right, so group policy. There's a few exploits around a little while ago. Paul Jennings developed some stuff a few years ago now, where it's basically exploiting group policy update transit and leveraging the lack of SMB signing, which is really, really cool. And actually configuration issues with group policy. So if you're really into this stuff, like I am, stick around because Mike Bloss is going to be talking about it next. And he's going to basically go through some of the attack vectors for group policy. So I won't deep dive too much into it. Stick around with this one. So H. Oh, that's a good one, but no, not quite. Sorry? No, I don't think so. Potato. So it's kind of an exploit. This one's still around. I actually used this just the other day. I was very, very surprised. So it's a series of steps. It's actually a really, really cool chain attack, where you exploit the way that Windows looks up names in the domain. So you exhaust UDP ports, and you force a local kind of like a NetBIOS name service lookup, and then you fire up a fake WPAD proxy. You start up Windows Defender, and you point essentially the proxy to yourself, which points the proxy to yourself, and then you control what Windows Defender is looking for. And there's like a redirect there where you can relay credentials to spawn a new process, and that process is always calc.exe.
Internet Explorer!
Right. 100 points for effort. So images. I was on a pen test a little while ago, and essentially there was some backup somewhere, and they had images on it. And I was fortunate enough that one of the VHDs was actually a backup of the domain controller. So cool. So what you can do is, if you can mount inside Disk Manager a VHD, and all you just do is just go in there and just filter the SAM systems files, grab some hashes, And if it's a domain controller, like in this case it was, you grab the mtds.dict and take that stuff offline and crack all the hashes, right? So that one's very fortunate for me. But there are some other vectors as well. So just say you have like SAN or something like that with like shared storage, and you have access to that shared storage where a lot of VMware images might be, either in a cold state or a hot state. You can potentially grab those images off, pump it through something like Mimikatz, or like pump it through your own ESX server, fire up Mimikatz and actually just extract some of the passwords. Or even if you just want to maybe plant something in there as well, it might work. Right, Jake. That's a good one. That's a good one. Not quite though. That's kind of falling into the exploit stuff, I suppose. Anyone else? Sorry? Nope. Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. But it's not kind of exploiting your local box. So, here we go. You guys are going to love it. Right. Hands up who's a pen tester. Hands up if you're not using Google on a pen test. Right, so things like default passwords for you find inside config files, or even like that classic GTP password, one via group policy, right? You can just jump on the web and get the key and actually reverse the encryption. Actually, just on a recent pen test, I found the user manual for one of the door access cards, which is on the Swipey system, and in there was some default creds, which were not your normal admin type stuff. It was something else. So that one kind of helped me out, because then I would have had access to the doors. Right. Okay. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah. Alrighty. Love Kerberos. So this one's, you kind of need some privileges. So you need to be in a privileged position, or you need to have access to potentially like a virtual list, right? But if you get access to like mtds.dict, where you actually access a DC, you can grab some tickets and stuff like that and go down and check the path or passing some things around, and things like Kerberos thing as well. Right, L. Oh, L has it. Not quite. What was the other one, sorry?
Logs?
Yes, what was that? Oh, that worked. Yeah, thanks for that. Right, log files. So think of this situation. You're on a pen test, or you're on a kind of some kind of engagement, and you compromise a web server. And if you have read access on the Windows server, there's very little you can do. It's not like Linux where you get the shadow file and crack it. Unless you go down the path of exploiting something like that, the Apache local file include the shell exec stuff, which is good, but you might not be in that kind of situation because it might not be Apache. So you can go through some of the log files for like IIS logs, and it might have things like session tokens. So if it so happens to be that web server is also like a content management system where you can upload arbitrary files and folders and all those kind of things, you can actually upload something like a cmd.aspx or something, and then use that to gain access to the underlying operating system and execute arbitrary commands. Even things like, still, they might be passing across usernames and passwords, and they might be stored in the logs. Grab that data, you might be able to reuse that somewhere else, or target a high privileged user than what you have. And then, like I said, the Apache local file include shell exec is really cool, where you can, it's relying on the local file include, which basically store some PHP code inside the log file and call that log file, and then executes commands and get some shells. Things like on SQL server, you get connection strings. So you might be flying around inside log files, and you might be able to use those to target other database servers or database servers, and then go down that path and escalate privileges out, stuff like that, and break out. SQL transactions. So not every engagement you do is going up a DA, although it's very nice to get. It's not so nice on the reporting side. So you might want to look at credit card data, for example, right? So yes, I could get credit card data because I can see the log files when sort that stuff out. any kind of custom applications, there'll be usernames and passwords, probably anything custom is always kind of broken. Yeah. Right, Emma. The whole thing's just broken. Everyone in the house will have it up.
Memory?
Yes, that was a good one. Nice one. Rightio. So, memory access. There's been a ton of research, and there's a really good tool called Esclation. Fantastic tool, and some other tooling around as well. I can't remember what's there called. Here's one for the Thunderbolt attack, but basically the reason why Firewire, Thunderbolt, and the listings are so fast is because they have direct access to memory, and yeah, kind of bypass some protections. But because you have direct access to memory, what you can do, you can read portions of it. So tools like Inception, you can read the first 4 gigabytes of it. I said gigabytes, that's right. Yeah, so from there, we've used that on an engagement actually, where we had an assessment, there was a laptop, and it's like, hey, this thing's been left on the train, what can you do? All right, cool, have a look. And it just so happened to be this very old laptop, had a Firewire port, and we had no computers in the office that actually had Firewire ports still. So I got one from home, from the garage somewhere. And then use tools like Inception, and you can actually just bypass login. So just type in administrator, push enter, and there you go, you're on as admin. Which is quite handy. Ooh, nice one, nice one. But you kind of need to be in a privileged area, I suppose, to kind of get those. But NDI, that's a good one. I don't have that one. It's probably better. Network shares. Right, so like I said with the images before, we've got backups and stuff like that floating around, some scripts. On a recent engagement, there was a shortcut, which is really cool. I didn't have direct access to, there was no username and password, sorry, within this script, but the script was being called by certain user types within this organization, which was mounting a hidden share on the network, so it's super secure. And then it just so happened to be that on that hidden share was like the crown jewels, which was great, because it was like the executive team could only mount those files, and that was the target, so it ended up kind of really good. So have a look at any shortcuts that are invoked by any other users on the server. Encrypted admin passwords in sysvol, so you can use tools like GetUTP password as part of the PowerSploit toolkit, which if you're on the domain connected machine, is also on the Active Directory server for passwords within XML files. Application installers, right? So if you are in a whitelisted situation, you can always bypass it, it's pretty easy, but what you can do is actually install every single tool available. Typically, by default, a default app locker policy will allow you to install any MSIs because they're whitelisted. So just install absolutely everything. But one of those things might be the CAFI and like the Privis. Not to pick on the CAFI, I'm sorry. Yeah, so things like users sharing their drives. So like typically maybe in a dev environment, you might have the dev team sharing like their C drive, and inside there they have iNet Hub, and they're running IIS server as system. So then you can kind of just write something in there, like again, cmd.aspx to that drive, and then just fire up their web server and browse that command. Office, yeah. What was that one? The first one? Was it people? People? Someone say people?
You don't know.
It was actually meant to be, but I don't know the alphabet.
So what'd you learn at BSides? I'll let the alphabet. Right, oh, it's people, but we'll give it to you anyway. Right, so Citrix. Citrix is a really cool environment where you can go through. All the slides are going to be shared after this, so if you want to just grab the slides. I'll take the very non-copyright protected stuff out. So Citrix is a shared environment where everyone has access to it, and a lot of people tend to use the root directory or ctemp or ctemp2 or ctemp12 as like their home drive or something like that, right? So there might be some really cool data stored in there. I found in the past where the host that I compromised was like the jump host of all the admins, and inside there they had a spreadsheet of like some of the hosts and some of the passwords associated with some of the hosts, which was really cool. VMware has a similar offering as well as Citrix, and so does Microsoft. So like through the remote desktop services and things like internet kiosks, like if they're not adequately locked down and you're able to browse some of the local data that the previous user was, I don't know, like they might use like airport terminals, you might use a library or something like that, and it won't have something until like deep freeze where it kind of resets the system after the reboot. So have a look around, you might find some interesting finds there. All right, now Pete. Right. If you get this one, I'll give you my laptop. All right, here we go. No. 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 Fishy. All right. Yeah. Alright, so obviously passwords. So your default kind of things like, hey, I'm a new employee here, here's your password, welcome one, and it doesn't set on first, or doesn't force you to change it on first log on, is always a good thing. And you can just dump it a NTDS file, or you'll see welcome one, password one, you know, client name one or something like that. That will probably constitute like 30 or 40% of the dumps. But it's a bonus round too, so what's it got PXE boot? Who said PXE? Someone, anyway. So PXE boot, what it is, it's pre-boot execution environment where you can basically remote load images onto your local store, or onto your local workstation, sorry. So what I've done in the past with this type of attack is fire up something like VirtualBox or VMware, bridge the adapter, connect to the network, fire up, make it boot off network, you know, you push F12 or whatever it is, and you basically get a list of all their workstation servers and stuff like that they're presenting, which they want to roll out. And I have used this in the past and it's worked. Whereas with this client, I think from memory they had about 6 or 7 different types of images on there. And it took a long time, they just basically booted every single one and like, went through the whole process. It took a very long time. And then from there, like they're already the domain joins that there's your footholds. You don't need to try to exploit, you know, Jenkins or Tomcat to get a foothold on the network. You're already part of the domain. So that's a really good kind of check. And I won't really go into recommendations, but too much. If you want to kind of have a chat to me about what you think might be a good idea to stop these type of attacks, have a chat. All right, Q. No. Anyone else? No? All right. No. All right, here we go. Right, QR codes. So the QR codes can actually store a lot of data. So, so scanning QR codes might be a really good vector for things like, you know, you're checking in for your flight home or whatever, and you know, typically they'll have like a QR code for your boarding pass, right? And you know, I'm sure that satisfies all their input. And business class or 1 = 1, or first class 1 = 1, or pilot or 1 = 1, you know, that kind of thing. Right, so, and anything like line injection as well, can you break out of the piece of software that's actually parsing the QR scanner? Might win. I've never personally used this attack, but there is a really good paper down there that's linked. And it says using QR codes as attack vector. Actually pretty good. Right. R. No, not reuse. Registry. Right, who's that? There you go. It's easy. Alrighty, so the registry. So there's some really cool keys inside the registry that you will typically check. Sorry about that. Okay. Oh, that's better. So, okay. So there's some really good keys that we will first look at, and it's a good tooling as well. Windows Prevents Check by Pentest Monkey. it's not been updated in a while, but it's still pretty useful. And there's like BRoot as well, which does kind of similar kind of stuff. So there are some good tooling out there. But if you're in a situation where you can't actually upload any tools, and you might be in that situation, you might be in a Citrix environment where you don't have access to clipboard, or it's literally a kiosk with no USB, you don't have internet. What you'll try and do is check like run as once, rename and reboot. Always install Elevate is a really good key to have a look at. That basically means that you can install MSI packages in an elevated fashion. And there's a Metasploit module for packaging like MSI, so that if you're in a situation you can't put one on there, you might be able to kind of bundle up your own on the fly. SRP policy enumeration. So SRP is not really around too much anymore. It's been kind of superseded by AppLocker, but I have seen it around, and you can enumerate SRP policy through the registry, and that might kind of hint at what's been locked down and where you do have access to, and any kind of applications that are installed. You might not have access to like the C drive or like program files to see what apps are installed, but through the registry you can actually see. That might open up that attack service that you want.
Schedule task.
Whoa, this is good. This is services. Anyone else say services? So services. So just check what's on startup. So you've got the auto runs tool you can use as well, but bundle it up with the file permissions, registry permissions that you want to check. There are some really good tools that can do this for you. But check how are they starting? Are they starting as a system? Are they starting as a domain joined user, which might be super handy to use in one another portion of the network? And what privileges do they have, right? So if you're in a situation where you're trying to enumerate privileges on a service and you can't see what privileges it has, it means that it's got higher privilege than you have. You don't have access to see that object. So that's probably a good target. And I'll generally avoid any like base Windows services. They're always pretty good. And also keep in mind when you're doing this kind of stuff, what other binaries do they call? Does a service start and then call other binaries? So for instance, like let's pick on SAP now, so it's Cappy. Like SAP starts up, when you log in, it's running as a hard proof, and then in there they've got some tooling where you might be loading up their own calculator or their own notepad or something like that. That's calling another binary, right? And you might have access or control of that other binary, and then you can spawn the command prompt or gain access to something that you shouldn't. Right, T. Tempo, that's a good one. Yeah. What was that one, sorry? Task, yeah, I'll Right, so tasks or task manager, task lists. So have a look at what is running. This one I actually did use, I can't remember when, it was a little while ago. So have a look at what web services are running. There's some attacks against Apache where if you control what it's doing, like if you use a config file, you can get some good situations. SQL servers or other applications, so let me enhance. So this one is a real screenshot from the client. No, it's not. Right, so for instance, in Task Manager, you just press Control-Delete and have a Task Manager. In there, on the command line, you have to always go right to go say view extra columns and you can see the command line options. In there, it actually had -u, SA, -p, password, whatever, also stupid long string, and then a database server to connect to. So this is a really good win, right? So then you do that classic, all right, I'm just going to target that database now. It's SA, so you can easily fire up command exec, break out of that, fire up some mimikatz, dots and passwords, and then have a really good time. All right, you. Right. What's one over there? That's good. That's good. Come on. Alright. This one's a classic, so that might give it away. There we go. Who said that? No. Alright, so unquoted service path. So this one's absolutely classic. So Windows. So this is an issue with a search order path, similar to how the DLL stuff works in terms of like all, what it searches for when it's going through looking for an executable. And this vulnerability is basically exploiting spaces, right? Because Windows, like Linux, doesn't like spaces, so they put around quotes. So if you have access to a directory where you can write, where there's a space in the folder path, you can potentially, let's just say it's calling program, I'll just say it's calling cat.exe service, but if that's inside program files, because that's what it is. And then you have right access to C drive, you can put program.exe, and the search path is going to look at C drive first for program, based on the little tilde thing, and then it's going to find your exe file and launch your file instead of going down the full path. So the fix to that is just put around quotes. And there's a really good one-liner there. It's on every single blog that I've kind of listed that I got it from. So graceful security is actually a really good blog. Check this out another one. Oh yeah, bingy. Variable, that's cool. No, not quite. Yeah. Right, so this one's, sorry, volume shadow copy. So it kind of is a situation where we need proofs, so I'm sorry. But essentially, Windows locks files when they're in use. Volume shadow copy, you can still view a file because it makes almost like a copy of it. So what you can do is you can run a volume shadow copy. There's the command down the bottom there, and copy the entire system directory into like an alternate data stream. So, and that would allow you to access things like the SAM file, security file, and system file, which you typically, want to use for offline hardware tracking. If you're on a domain controller, this is a really good attack to get. This is how you get the mtds.zip file. But also when it comes to stress, you can access other files as well. That annoyance where you're trying to delete a file and it's just not working, or something like that, where you're trying to copy a file, it's not working. You can actually just use volume shadow copy and copy the shadow. Or things like database files, right? So you can actually copy a running database file, pump it into your own database, and access the database that way. Right, W. Windows, this is broken. Right, wireless LAN passwords. Here we go. Right, so this is a very interesting method because think about the situation. You're at a kiosk at an airport or an internet cafe, and you're in a position where you can dump in clear the Wi-Fi passwords for that network that they're all using, right? So then you fire up your own laptop or your own device, and you have access to that same wireless network, and then you can perform some backdoor scans, or maybe target other users, fire up responders, and potentially get some hashes out and stuff like that. But I also got a bonus round due to popular demand. So WSuspect is another tool. Developed a little while ago now, 2015. So it's a really good attack vector. So essentially it exploits non-SSL WSUS updates. And having a look, seriously, there's not been one network where I've seen WSUS over HTTPS. It's always over HTTP because they've just set it up and it works, if they're still using WSUS. Right, so this exploits the vulnerability that, and in transit it installs drivers and kind of install whatever you want after that. Right, thanks. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah. Radio. Glad there's no fruit. So extract MTDS. So use your volume shadow copy, use your PXC boot as well, like in that example I used before, where there was the domain controller image on a network share. It cracks the passwords, pass the hash, and it's actually really good. Now, there's good tooling out there for this. There's mtdsextract.com you go to, and it uses, I'll never get the acronym right, libesssedb. And it can be a bit painful to install. I don't have a reference here, sorry. But I'll update the slides and pop it up the and that's some really good tooling to actually, it's a forensics tool used to extract the MTDS, and we just use it for our own evil ways. Right, why? Yeah, that's right. I had nothing. So I made one up. Right, so this is so when you launch Word documents off something like, just say SharePoint, and those Word documents are referencing template files, they typically look over SMB to see where that template is stored, and it might be on the shared drive, might be on the local drive, or something like that. If it's on the shared network drive, you can potentially get in the middle of it, and then you can inject your own template instead. And of course, it's macro enabled, and the user will automatically just click yes, because of course I've let it done the shared. All right, last and
0 day.
0 day. That's awesome. That's very good. I'll give you that one. Right, yeah. Everyone read that? Spent a lot of time. All right, there's some resources there. There's some people with do a lot better work than I do. So there's a really good presentation. It's I can't remember how old it is. It's pretty old now, but it's still super relevant. Brett Moore did the Encyclopedia of Windows Pre-Desk. That's actually really good to have a look at that. Did a really good job of explaining some of the things. Some blogs to keep an eye out on, some kernel ownage, Pentest Monkey, SpectreOps, AD Security, Google Project Zero has some really awesome stuff. Twitter feeds to have a look at as well, especially Tuscon. And that's it.
Well, that was awesome. Do we have any questions? Yeah, just over here.
You mentioned physical memory exploits using, like say, USB Type-C or firewire or whatever. Does Windows 10 have DMA restricted? I thought it did.
So the question was, so I haven't seen it in a while. From my understanding, there are some, you can actually disable it. So if you are in a situation where you could disable it, but to answer your question, I haven't tested it on Windows 10 because no one has really has firewire anymore. There's some good attacks for USB-C coming out, and thank you.
Okay, can we give a round of applause for Luke?